Everybody wants the BMW B58. It's more tunable, owners love it because it's more reliable, and on top of it, even Toyota said it's good enough for their platform in the Supra. But what about its smaller brother, the B48? 2 less cylinders, it actually produces more power per liter than the B58. Yes, there's some pros and some cons of both of these engines. I'm going to break this down, the good, the bad, the ugly, the models you'll find them in, and which is the right engine for you. Let's get into it now. Now, both the B48 and the B58 are considered B-modular engines. In other words, B38, 48, and 58 engines are all part of a similar platform. They're packaged in the same way, and essentially the B48 is 2 cylinders less. They both have dual overhead cams, vanos, and Valvetronic systems. They both feature an amazing closed deck design, so you don't have to worry about blown head gaskets regardless of how much boost you hit them with. And while the B58 comes with a 3-liter inline turbocharged 6, the B48 comes with a 2-liter inline turbocharged 4. Now, it's quite clear with similar turbos, similar engine and platforms, you'd expect more horsepower with 2 more cylinders, and you'd be right. Because the BMW B58 comes with an inline 6-cylinder that can produce as much as 322 up to 382 horsepower in stock trim, while the B48 engine comes with an output of 154 up to all the way to 312 horsepower, with more or less the 255 being smack dab in the middle, which is the engine configuration and tune you're going to probably find in the vast majority of BMWs. Now, in top states of tune, you'll notice the B48 actually has 156 horsepower produced from every liter of displacement, whereas the B58 only produces, in top tune, 127 horsepower per liter. In other words, the smaller 4-cylinder engine actually has a better thermal efficiency than the B58 and actually produces more power per its displacement. Some say it's high levels of tune. I say it has to do with the fact that 6-cylinder, 8-cylinder, you've actually got more heat building up inside and you're able to hit less cylinders with more boost. Now, with that said, everybody asks the infamous question, how long do these engines last? Well, the B58, when it's maintained properly to the T in the letter of the law, according to BMW land, you should be good for about 300 to 500,000 kilometers on a B58 engine if you take care of it. But meantime, on the B48, it's only good for a range of 200 to 300,000 kilometers. It works harder, there's less cylinders, and to produce the performance, often you've got to get the revs up and you're spinning the engine a little bit harder, a little bit faster, a little bit more frequently. Now, to note, of course, the older outgoing engines like the N47s and some of those older inline 4s were absolute catastrophic failures for BMW. The B48 stepped up and absolutely introduced a level of reliability BMW hasn't seen for ages. The same with the B58. When that came out of the woodwork, they waved bye-bye to the N55, which, while it was better than the predecessor N54, which was a literal trash can on wheels, which I owned one, I can attest. All kinds of problems, coolant leaks, oil leaks, catastrophic failures. I mean, it didn't matter. If it was leaking one fluid, it wasn't leaking another. If it was leaking this, it was leaking that. We had issues with direct fuel injectors, wastegate rattle. I mean, it was a constant barrage of attacks on me and my wallet just trying to keep that vehicle running. But they both had a variety of improvements and enhancements. You never quite get it right the first time, and even the B48 and B58 seemingly does get better with age. The first generation of the B48 came out in 2014. It produces a range of power of 181 horsepower up to about 255 horsepower. Then in 2015, it changed. It actually dropped slightly, and the range became 154 horse up to about 248 horsepower. And in 2016, it received multiple improvements on the cooling systems and revisions that were intended to keep coolant in the engine and less of it on the ground. In 2018, it got better injectors, and as well, the fueling system improved, gave it better performance, better reliability. And in 2019, it received the technical upgrade. And we've heard a lot of these great features in the BMW B58. Well, the B48 shares in a lot of that too. Stronger case of the engine, it's got better fuel system, better cooling system, more reliability dialed in. As well, with the heat encapsulation, what it does is it keeps more consistent heating around the engine, so it prevents all that high and low temperature swings, which obviously destroys a lot of the plastics under the hood. And we know BMW, plastic fantastic, so anything they can do to reduce the impact against plastics, they were working on it, and the technical update was exactly what they needed. Then in 2020, they had a mild mild hybrid update in some models, and in 23 and newer, they had more emissions optimization, tweaking and tuning every single year, making slight improvements and enhancements, looking at what's working, what's not. So generally speaking, the newer B48 engine, the better and more reliable they're going to be. Compare that to the B58. In 2015, it came a year after the B48. Featured an inline 6-cylinder engine with a twin-scroll single-turbo engine, and of course with the heat encapsulation and the fuel system improvements, as well as the case improvements and the bottom end, meant that these engines were pretty robust. In 2018, it saw a major update for a TU1 upgrade, further enhancing the reliability, making fuel system more robust, turbocharging, wastegate issues. A lot of the issues we recognized in the N55 and N54 started going away. In 2018, there was an improved exhaust manifold update. Also in 2018, they had a revised timing chain update, which, again, as I've spoke about this before, both of these engines have the timing chain placed at the back of the engine, which is against the firewall. And if there's one thing that we've heard about a lot of the BMWs in the past with engines that had those timing chains at the back, meant that huge labor costs, expensive repairs, and the worst part is a lot of those timing chains would catastrophically fail. A lot of the older engines that these engines replaced had timing chain issues, guide ramps that were plastics that would crumble and fail, and ultimately meant that sometimes by as little as 40,000 miles, you have a catastrophic engine failure because you had a timing chain that slipped a cog and essentially piston and valve went bang. But as it stands, the improved timing chain setup and gear, BMW finally figured it out, because these aren't necessarily notoriously known for timing chain issues. Both the B48 and the B58 are much vastly improved. In 2018, the B58 also got a split cooling system. Yeah, that's right, they have 2 cooling tanks. In 22, they also received a 48-volt mild hybrid update that was also known as the TU Upgrade 2. And in 2022, there was a stronger emissions compliance, and ultimately the car got quieter, smoother, and emitted and farted out less gas. Now you ask yourself, why would BMW possibly want to put a timing chain at the back of the engine? Haven't we learned already from access issues, catastrophic chain problems, and just the huge labor rates? Well, there are some positives to that, believe it or not. It actually reduces noise and vibration. A lot of that's buried under the sound deadening, and you hear less of it in the cabin. It also reduces the overall length of the engine, and it improves the packaging. In other words, some of that hardware goes further under in useless space. It shortens up the front, gives you a better styling opportunity, potentially creates something more unique and stylish. And you know what? I'm not so sure that helped. I mean, with the 4 Series and the buck teeth, I think many would agree that that's a hit and miss. But again, the drawbacks, of course, would be massive expensive repairs if you have to actually remove the engine to change the timing chain, or even for a simple inspection because you're hearing some kind of weird rattle noise and you want your mechanic to do an inspection. Even that is going to cost more money just to have a look. Now, again, reliability breaks down due to a couple of things. Maintenance, which you can affect as the owner, but the other thing is the way the engines are stressed, how much boost they produce, how much fuel. And as a result, the power that each engine produces is quite substantially different, to the point where almost the B48 in top trim almost overlaps the B58 in bottom trim. For example, base B48 and 30i series trim produces about 248 horsepower, maybe as high as 255 horsepower. And the torque ratings are about 258 pound-feet of torque. The B58, on the other hand, ranges from 335 up to 382 horsepower, with the torque peaking at about 369 pound-feet. Again, reaffirming that the B48 is generally running harder, hotter, and producing more power. I want to break down some of the goods and the bads and the uglies. We already know the goods. They're some of the most reliable engines on the market, bar none. The B48 is better than Mercedes and Audi in terms of engines that are actually robust, produce the power, efficiency, and they're highly sought after. It's even better than what we've seen in Audi land with the turbo V6s, and even better yet than Mercedes and their V6s that were turbocharged a few short years ago. The B58 and the B48 have gone way up the ranks in reliability. Consumer Reports loves them. JD Powers doesn't think they're too bad either. And I've personally driven these engines, both of them, extensively, and can reaffirm they both produce power, they sound great, and they're likely the most robust European engines you can find anywhere today at any cost. There are issues because you can get carbon fouling. Now remember, later engines do come with the direct port and fuel injection, like they're sort of copying the DS engines from Lexus and Toyota. But the earlier generations, carbon fouling is an issue. Charge pipes can blow apart in the seals, and you have boost leaks and check engine lights. Fuel injector replacements can cost you $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. Turbocharger failures, $3,000 to $5,000, and they included with the wastegate. They're not a cheap fix because access is a little bit limited. Cooling system failures, anywhere from $1,000 to about $3,000 if you're doing water pumps, thermostats. They are mechanical now, which is better than the outgoing electrical ones, but those can leak. And the oil filter housing cracks and leaks can cost as much as $2,000, maybe $2,500 to rectify. See, this is a case where you could have coolant into the oil or oil into the coolant. Just the fact that there's cases where some of these oil filters themselves get sucked in and you can't even remove them from the housing. But cracks internally or externally are a commonly known issue, and allegedly there's lawsuits, people chasing BMW saying that they knew about these issues and they've been producing these oil filter housings that are a little bit defunct and a little deficient. The B58, they have the same issue. Of course, the oil filter housing and the cracks and the leaks, but also carbon fouling in earlier engines, boost leaks is the same storyline as you're getting in the B48s. Valve covers and oil pans can all let oil out, and there's some gaskets in there, and somehow it affects the B58s a little more than the B48s. Water pumps, thermostats, $1,200 to $2,500. And again, as I've said, at least they're mechanical water pumps. It's a little bit less problematic than the older N54 that I had an electric water pump, which was plastic housing. It's a pain in the rump. It was attached to the thermostat, and it was literally 8 hours on the driveway for me to rectify that. You got to jack the car up, take the bottom subframe, half the bottom of the engine out, and it was a really, really tight quarters. Turbo, wastegate issues, $3,500 to $6,000. Same problem with the B48 and the B58. And in very rare occasions, I've heard of for 10 grand having catastrophic engine failures due to rod bearing issues. But some other common issues that people talk about, and I've been checking in the forums, and I know one person that actually has some of these issues. Vanos solenoids. PCVs, another issue. Positive crankcase ventilation, that is a well-known issue. And cooling loss. You don't see it on the ground. You don't smell it, but somehow it just seems to be dropping your level down. And a lot of owners are talking about this mysterious coolant loss. Take care of it and make sure that you don't have any leaks anywhere. Sometimes these tight engine quarters means that there could be a leak underneath somewhere inside, and by the time it makes it to the bottom, it's already burned off and you may not even see it. But sometimes these coolant losses, you have to ask yourself the question, where's it going? It's either leaking it or burning it. That 300,000 mile lifespan on a B48 and the 500,000 lifespan on the B58, those all come with a caveat. Strong attention to detail and aggressive maintenance. That's right. Oil changes, flushing your cooling with the like fluids, doing all those little maintenance items. If there's a check engine light, don't wait around. Take care of it immediately. You hear that famous bung? That's your go time. But if you want one of the most reliable and fun and tunable drivetrains in BMW world, both the B48 and B58 engine. Now, the B48 engine comes with designations like 30, whereas the B58 comes with designations like 40. The BMW B48, of course, with the 4-cylinder engine, you'll find in vehicles like the 230, 330, 430, 530, X2 M35i, the X330i, and you'll also find it in the Toyota Supra 2.0 GR and, of course, Mini Cooper S and the JCW cars by Mini. But the B58 is going to be found in vehicles that are a little bit more sport-tuned, cars that generally have a reputation for better tuning, better performance, and enthusiast cars more often seek the cars with the B58 engines with those 40 designations, such as the M240, the M340, the 540, the X3 M40i, the X5 xDrive 40i, the Z4 M40i, the Toyota Supra 3.0, and the Ineos Grenadier. So the bottom line is, if you want a more efficient engine, it's going to return better fuel economy, it's working harder, but it's more efficient, and it's really doing its best to produce the maximum power per liter, you buy a vehicle with a B48. If you want the best performance, the 3 Series with the M340i or the M240i, or even the X5 with the xDrive 40i. These are classic examples of the sweet spot in each one of the lineage. The 40i make the best performance, the best tuning, and truly is one of the engines that I truly love and adore. That being said, for budget-minded people who prefer a more efficient drivetrain, lower cost of maintenance and servicing, and it's going to be a lot cheaper to buy into, it's ultimately going to be an easier car to own for the long haul, go with the 30 Series and you go with the B48. Both are considered top of the industry, and of course, both of them are a great choice. Many automotive critics like both of these engines. For me, I personally would choose anything with the 40 Series. I love that 40. I love the B58. I love the S58 even more in the M3s and M4s, but that's for another day. If you're a little more frugal and you like efficiency, Get the B48? Hope that spells it all out for you right there. The best BMWs you can buy and the only ones I would buy this year. And as well, maybe why are used BMWs so cheap? Maybe you want to take a look at the used car market for some of these. There are some amazing buys out there. Hope to see each and every one of you real soon, everybody. We'll catch you then. Bye-bye.